City dumps Plan E charter. Medford Mercury, November 5th, 1986. Now, there's not a lot to read on all this stuff, but there is a couple of interesting things. They talk about the numbers and all that, and it was 11,598 votes were cast to change the government, and 7,684 were to maintain the current Plan E. And there was this little extra article in here. This is good. First, they said to Marilyn Perica, "Are you thinking of running for mayor?" And she said, essentially, "I'm in." Then they talked to Robert Penta, said he was out because he was with her. And then they said a third candidate was mentioned the other night. State Representative Michael McGlynn was contacted. He said he had not thought about running yet, although several people had already called him and asked him to consider joining the race. Quote, "I haven't given it a thought." A number of people have called me this morning, like probably 1,000, urging me to get into it, but I haven't thought about it. The people have made a major change in their form of government last night, and we should give it a few weeks before deciding if they're going to run. Also, Marianne Frizzoli and her organization said that they had maintained throughout the campaign that the charter change movement is a philosophical question and was not an attempt to defeat or elect any particular candidate. So that was the headline on that. Here's my notes. Yeah, this was good. In the newspaper article, they said, and I say this with apologies to John Lennon, because remember it was the People's Movement. Well, of course, in the chant of the night when they won, they were chanting, "Power to the people." I can just picture it, because I know how old they were, I know what they looked like. I wish that I had videotaped that. Of course, it wasn't videotaped, I didn't have to videotape. Anyway, the Mercury came back and said, and this was very nice, upset in Medford, but they also said in this editorial that, and I'm proud of this, I was born in Medford, I've lived in Medford most of my life. They said there was very little antagonism that surfaced this year. The planning form of government has been changed, and even during the present period, there was very little uproar or any type of animosity. And I'm very proud of that. Proud to be from Medford. Now, the last thing I'd say before I'm asking Paul to come up, and Paul's going to give you more. Paul experienced it. He's only a couple of days older than me, but he experienced it in the way that I did. There was an article in the Medford Mercury on November 11th, just a week later. That is Marianne Frizzoli, who's now Marianne Harold. And she talked about what occurred. So I'll just wrap with this. She said that this movement began when she met Vinnie Giovanelli, who's a Medford police officer, a very popular police officer. She said, according to Frizzoli, the idea of changing the charter came one night more than 2 years ago at Heartland, which was a food store, which was out, I believe, where right. And she had a chance conversation with Patrolman Giovanelli about the problems in the city, and she said, "I've got to do something about it." Well, she did. Then they talked about what she did during the campaign. They had hired Michael Goldman, who was a poll taker. He's a political consultant even now. And his polls were very helpful to her. She said that when the first poll came in, she was flabbergasted to find out that 73% of the people were in favor of abolishing Plan E. So that gave her a lot to go on. And then, this is the last bit I have, she said in the article that Plan E, I think she meant Plan E Civic Association, argued that Plan A would bring corruption to City Hall. She said, quote, "They played into the fears of having a big boss take over. What they are saying," she said, "is that the devil you know is better than the devil you don't." Now this is where I'm going to end my comments. So, the Plan A form of government came in. She's talking about the fear of having a big boss. I love Michael McGlynn as my own brother. He becomes mayor for the next 28 years. Now, when all this started, last point, then Paul, please come up. When all this started, Steve Hamilton was the other assistant city solicitor. Now, years later, maybe about 6 years ago, this is just before Richard Lee died, Steve Hamilton came in to see us and to say hello. So he said, you know, Mark, do you remember Bob Penta back at the charter change, what he was saying? And I said, well, refresh my memory. He said, we should change to a strong mayor form of government because if we don't like the mayor, we can always vote them out. So then Steve said, as he was only he could with his dry humor, he said, how'd that work out? So I give you my good friend.